Hello and good morning. The theme for today's event is Levels Unlocked. And when I was asked to talk on this subject, I was wondering how can I best add value to this topic and for this audience. So what I'm going to do is going to talk a bit about my own life, some of the examples from my life where looking back, I believe I did unlock levels. So I'll tell you a bit about my life and my corporate journey specifically. But what I also do is I'll share some examples from the outside world where you can see how some very successful and very relatable people have actually unlocked labels. So what you have on screen now is a very famous personality. I don't think in our country anybody needs to really get an introduction for that person. And we all know him. We all know Sachin as the best batsman in the world, right? And he has so many records to his name. How many of us know what he really wanted to do in life when he started off? He actually wanted to become a fast bowler. Yes, and he was so passionate about it that he wanted to go to MRF Pace Academy to actually hone his skills in that. And he did go there. And in fact, when he was going there, he didn't even want to carry his own batting kit for that because he just wanted to focus on his bowling. It was his brother who suggested he should carry the kit for just in case. And just in case, as he was practicing in the nets in Chennai, the legendary Dennis Lillee saw him batting. And he told him to forget bowling and focus on his batting because he saw the genius in Sachin Tendulkar. Sachin took his advice, and 2 years later, he did make his Test debut. And we know what happened after that. I mean, he was the youngest one to have the first Test half century, then the youngest one to have the first Test century, and rest everything, as they say, is history, right? So, but what is also important to know here is how Sachin did on his bowling front. I mean, he did claim more than 200 wickets, more than 200 international wickets throughout his career across all formats, and which is a pretty successful figure actually. Not many bowlers can claim that. And but in the process, what he did was he looked at the indications. He did follow the same advice coming from Dennis Lillee, and he became a very, very successful batsman. So that's a story of a very successful person, who went through quite a few things before he became what he became. All right, let's come to the second personality. Again, another person doesn't need any introduction. BBC declared him the voice of the millennium. And actually, this is what he wanted to become. He wanted to become a voice. He wanted to become a radio artist. He did multiple attempts. He did make multiple attempts at All India Radio in Delhi, followed by in Bombay, and he got rejected everywhere. And he was repeatedly told that his voice was not good enough, and then that he should focus on something else. In fact, he was so dejected from these rejections that at some stage he went back to Kolkata and became he joined the freight business there. But as destiny would have it, he kept coming back to Bombay, to Bollywood, and and then he became what he became. He became a very, very successful actor, probably the most successful mega star we have seen, who has been entertaining us for the last 51 years. As recent as 2020, we had a movie. And going back to his desire to become a voice artist, I think his is one of the most impactful voices in India. What's the proof for that? Whenever we need somebody giving us the right message to the whole country, be it like Do Bood Zindagi Ki for Pulse Polio vaccination campaign, or be it to remind us to wear masks, and maintain social distancing during these times of COVID, whom do we look at? We look at Amitabh Bachchan. He has, to his credit, more than 50 film songs as well, across many languages. So he did become a very successful, fairly successful voice artist. But before becoming that, he went through his own journey. And that's very important. He kept on going, and he did not take those, short-term rejections as failures in his life. So that's the learning that we can take from there. Last one, my favorite. I think many of you will recognize it. This guy, very famous personality, he's Giorgio Armani. He's the owner of one of the most successful fashion brands in the world. And I think his net worth is more than $9 billion, if I remember correctly. And that says a lot about this person. A person, who is the legend from the fashion industry. You know what he wanted to do in life when he started off? He wanted to become a doctor, pretty much like me, for whatever reasons. And he did go to medical school in Italy, I think the University of Milan, where he spent 2 years learning medicine. As luck would have it, from there he went on and joined army. He dropped medical school after 2 years. Obviously, he didn't complete it. But when he joined army, because of his background in medicine, he was again asked to join the medical division there. He did, and he did serve army for 4 years, only to realize not only that he didn't like medicine, he didn't like army either. So he dropped off from there. And then for the next several years, he did variety of jobs, including working in those fashion shops, and then running his own freelance fashion designing business, creative designing business, etc., etc. And eventually, more than 20 years later, he founded what is now known as Giorgio Armani, the famous men and women apparel brand. So what's common between these three stories? If I have to summarize that, I think the common factors I would say are they were open to feedback. Number one, they listened to others, but before that, they listened to themselves. They had some thoughts, some ideas on what they wanted to do. But while they had those ideas, they were not rigid about it. And that's the next and the more important thing. They were flexible, they were open to feedback, they listened to others, and they did not take failure in something or the inability to do that thing in that point in time as a failure in life. They moved on, and they remained focused on achieving something and going after their passion. So switching track, coming to my own story, I told you I'll share about a few learnings from my own life. My personal life, but more importantly, my professional life, and how I have over these years unlocked a few levels for myself, right? So, and if I were to look at my life, I would probably break it down into 3 blocks, of 1 decade each. You can say 3 phases of life. I'll say 3 blocks of life, about a decade each. The first one, of course, my early years, the decade of 1990s, right? So it's very important to share with you. So I grew up in a small city, smaller tier 2 city called Aligarh. It's close to Delhi, but not very close as well. So it's about 130 kilometers from Delhi. And it's a smallish town, mostly known for the university, Aligarh Muslim University, and for its multicultural environment. So you know about that, and it had a big impact, right? So growing up in that smaller city with oftentimes scarcity resources, but also scarcity of information, scarcity of exposure. There was very limited exposure that one could have in that city, and of course, as I said, resources. Coming from that typical middle class kind of background, but also important to know. The economic reforms took place in 1991, and I grew up those early years, very late in 80s and early 90s. That was a time where the Indian economy was not doing great, right? And that's the reason we opened up and made those reforms. So all these factors around there which played a role, as I said, growing up in that smallish city with scarcity of resources around me, and multicultural environment, and also I think small city being a university town, there was a lot of emphasis on education. There was a lot of emphasis, so much so that it was very commonly said that if you don't really study hard and get through your education well enough, you can't do much in life. So those are the factors that played a role. And lastly, how did I become a doctor? End of my schooling, I had to choose what I want to do. And if I tell you that I wanted to be a doctor, I'll be lying. I didn't. In fact, I wanted to, if at all there was any inspiration and I had any idea, that probably was to become a computer engineer, because that was the buzzword those days. Not that I had any inside inspiration for that either. But there was a bit of a experience that I had. I had a bit of a situation. So it was one of my teachers, who kind of challenged me, and in an effort to pull me out of that. And it was his challenge, which was to become somebody in life, to become a doctor in life, that I accepted publicly, and then really went after that. That's how I qualified PMT and became a doctor. So I have no regrets. I think in the end it has worked for me. It has worked beautifully for me, and I'm always grateful to that teacher of mine. But why I'm telling you is I went with the flow, and I landed up in a medical school. So So that kind of explains, that 10-year period, the first block of 10 years in a way. Fast forward, getting into the second block of life, which starts in 2000 and goes on to 2010. That was another very, very interesting phase of life. Which is good. I mean, all of those things stimulated and excited me, and I enjoyed my residency period. And again, without really having any deep inside inspiration to become a surgeon, I did become a surgeon. Again, no regrets. I think I've learned a lot during that phase, and I owe a lot to those surgical residency days, in fact. But while I enjoy this work, being as a surgeon, I couldn't imagine myself just removing gallbladders or meshing up hernias or evacuating brain hemorrhages for the rest of my life. It was unimaginable. And so now I started really wondering, what is it that I want to do? Do I really want to do it? When I say I couldn't imagine myself doing this, then what could I imagine myself doing? I had no idea. But the good thing here was that I had exposure. I mean, being in Delhi meant I had access to a lot of people. And one random conversation I was having with one of my friends at Ames outside of the OPD. He told me that he was planning to quit medicine and actually go for an MBA. And I was wondering, what is an MBA? What do MBAs do? How do you get into an MBA? What does MBA give back to you? What's that MBA's life like? How much do they earn? Etc. etc. And when I evaluated this, and one thing led to other, and then there was a sequence of events. But eventually, in those 2-3 months, I did a lot of thinking. I did a lot of research, met a lot of people, and then I realized, while I still don't want to do, don't know what I want to do in life, but I know I don't want to do the surgery for the rest of my life. And I looked at MBA as an option, and at least it will give me some, different experience, and maybe time to get out of core medicine and then see the wider world that's available in front of us, meet more people, and then do some reflection on what's there to pursue. So that was good, and that's how I decided I'll go after it. And it gave me that international perspective, again, from small city to big city, from big city to a global city, truly, a global city where things work in a different way, where people from different nationalities are there. And in that MBA batch of mine, there were only 2 doctors, so group of about 100 people, only 2 doctors, lots of people from different backgrounds, and where teachers are teaching subjects which you never really thought of, like macroeconomics and finance. I mean, accounting, they kind of scared me, at least in the beginning they did. In the end, I did fairly well. I mean, I had to work hard for it, and I want to play at the intersection of health and technology, and do some business out of it. I mean, that's what my clarity was. So that's the second block, as I said, or the second phase. The third phase came back from Singapore towards the end of 2009, early 2010, and since then about 10 years now. So these 10 years have been my corporate journey, right? So again, as I said, I'll tell you how I unlocked levels. So I started from a pretty entry-level kind of a position, and from there, in 10 years' time now, working large global MNCs and heading the organization. It's been quite a journey, right? It's been quite a journey, and for sure, looking back, there have been several moments in which I moved from one level to the other. And if I reflect on what happened in these 10 years, what has helped is, one thing is I've enjoyed what I've done. Been working on as I said earlier, I figured out I have to operate on health and technology. I'll say education was the third element I added to that, once I went on through the journey. So now I am very clear that I have to operate at the intersection of health, education, and technology, and then do something meaningful in this. Exactly what? I'm open to ideas, I'm open to suggestions, I'm looking for hints, I'm looking for opportunities. But as long as that meaningful thing happens at that intersection, I'm interested in that. And that's how I've started living it. So do I know the end goal? No. But I know the direction. I know broadly this is the trajectory I'm going to take. And second thing, if I look back, is on the way we have, I've been part of teams, fantastic people, colleagues, peers, seniors, and younger people who have worked with me and who have helped me grow. So that's another aspect of the journey which is worth mentioning. Being open to learn from everybody around. Everybody comes with an experience. Everybody comes with a unique skill or unique talent or unique knowledge that I don't have. And if I can keep on absorbing those, small things from everywhere, eventually I'm enriching my knowledge base and improving my skill set. And And also a couple of other things like traveling a lot during these 10 years, both within the country and outside. That has helped again, from a learning bit also, but also from an exposure bit. I'll say, from Aligarh to Delhi and Delhi to Singapore, but then to pretty much all over the world. Those experiences add a lot of value. They bring in a lot of insight into how one can look at things, how one can interpret a situation, or try to build something out of it. And then of course that experience of developing products, working with people, and going back to customers, going back to end users, and doing something meaningful to improve the outcomes in health, in education, the core sectors of our economy. I think that has been a very, very fulfilling experience. So if I have to end my 3 decades, of course, there's a long journey ahead, I'm sure. But if I have to really look at this point in time, I'll say I have picked up a lot of stuff in all these 3 decades and unlocked several levels. All these coming back to the theme for the day. Thank you so much for having me here. Thank you so much.